All right. Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to the TFTuesday Podcast. My name is Zil. It's great to have you all back for a fun-filled season 4. I know that obviously we had episode 1 come out last week, and that was a great recording from Anthrocon, but this is our first episode back in the chair. And of course, I'm joined by my illustrious co-host K-Libra. How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. It's very nice to not work for a little while, I'll say that.
Yeah.
It was the most pleasant thing to be fired from.
I think a positive way of looking at it.
I hated that job.
Yeah.
I even had Eva Lightmare,
Yeah.
Maypixel.
Yeah.
She was talking about her job and how it I was like, wait a minute, you work for this company? Actually, no. She said that she works for X internet company and that she has people crying into her ears, every other
Yeah.
time. And I'm like, oh, I know this job. And then
It's awful.
yeah, and that's when I showed my empathy, and she was like, I felt bad for being upset about people doing that, and I'm like, no, don't.
No.
It's horribly abusive.
It's a really hard fucking job to have, and yeah, people just fucking suck. They do not treat you well over the phone. So
Nope.
But the other good news is we have a freed up recording schedule. So
Yeah,
that's great.
yeah. I can be around for much more of these recordings, assuming people want me around.
Yeah.
And I hope that the guest that we have today, Kate Marquet,
Yeah.
doesn't mind me being around. Hello, Kate. It's the first time I meet you, and it's good to meet you.
Oh, pleasure to meet you both. No, love to have more company around.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess before we get started, I'll just, as always, mention that if you like the work that we do, you can go over to patreon.com/TFTuesdayPod and support us there. I realize I haven't mentioned this as often, and then people mentioned this was of interest. So we have a Discord that is associated with the Patreon. So if you pledge to the Patreon, you can join our wonderful Discord. We have the dankest memes ever. I recently ranked my musical tastes. So if you want those deep Zil cuts about musical theater, the Discord is where you want to be. And I will fight you if you don't like Mamma Mia, or Mamma Mia 2 for the record, because that is high camp, and I will fight anyone who says otherwise. So,
Poor Jesus Christ Superstar being so low on your list.
It just...
Nothing invites a conversation like fighting, right?
Yeah. But yeah, that's our Patreon. So you can always check that out if you are interested. But yeah, that's out of the way. I'm really excited to have Kate here and talk a little bit about her work and a lot of the different topics that she dives into. So Kate, why don't you give us a little introduction?
Hi, I'm not usually the one to talk here, but yeah, I'm Kate Marquet, and writer for transformation stuff for 4 or 5 years now, something, basically doing it effectively full-time, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm.
Have my own Patreon, which is Kate Marquet, which I've also been getting into more like doing audios, oddly enough. Gonna have some of those out soon, but yeah, I write short stories, novellas, about anything that people want, or generally pay me to do. So it could be a lot of things.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I didn't even realize that you were doing like audio stuff now as part of that. Are you like doing like audio reads of your own stories, or is it something else?
Yeah, right now it's just audio reads of I did one through Patreon. This other one's my first commission, so it'll be a sort of little 30-minute reading of one of my stories.
Oh, nice.
A new one.
Yeah,
That's
nice.
pretty cool. It's not a thing I've heard of other artists doing their own audiobooks.
Oh yeah, usually when it's the audio, it's more like audio plays and things which are really good. But yeah, I just thought well, I'm not that talented to do it yet, but I can read decently well, I think. So plus it plays into I just like being the storyteller, so
yeah,
reading it kind of has that element, so I like that.
Yeah, you definitely get to, because if you read a story flatly, then it can be dull. So you still get a chance to emote, and it's better to do that for your own work because you get to give that dimension that you've had in your mind about it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, everyone gets to be wow, you sound crazy. That's what you're like.
Yeah, there's always I feel like there's always a particular reaction when people hear what creators sound like. I've noticed this at conventions too. It's like you go up to someone and you introduce yourself and they're like, "Oh shit, that's you. That's what you sound like." I don't know. It's like this weird because you always have I think internally some sort of voice that maybe you're not even like conscious of, but you always like kind of assign when you're like reading someone's like stuff. Maybe this is an ADHD thing. I don't fucking know.
No,
But
you
like,
you get you get an impression. You get an impression
Yeah.
from people. You will in some way start to assume things depending on what people make, how they make it, how they carry themselves, all that kind of shit. So it's usually kind of like, come on, what is it? Are you really look that way or you don't look that way?
Yeah, yeah. The expectations set up, and it's like, oh, I hope they don't, don't sound as words like people thought in their head, sort of
Yeah.
thing. But yeah, especially as a writer and that sort of thing, it's like people just do the words, and yeah, they probably just have their own little narrator in their own head.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh yeah. It's something that I've done a lot. And then it's also uniquely satisfying if you have a character that's been animated and then you've like seen the animation first, but then you start reading it.
Yeah.
And suddenly you're like always reading it in the characters' voices and you're like, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, when it starts to click. And then on the flip side, when it's like wrong, you're like, ugh. No, that's not what it's supposed to sound like.
Yeah.
Doing
Oh,
it wrong.
Mhm.
So it's really interesting to have you on because I know you are, of course, a full-time writer, and it's always really interesting to kind of hear the perspective on, how someone kind of actualizes that into like a career. So I was curious as to like what got you into writing TF in the first place. Like every writer has a tragic villain backstory, so I'm curious to know what yours is.
I wouldn't say it's like a backstory, but I have like a tragic interlude at one point is like the best I sort of can rise to.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can just like I mean I've liked writing since I was like in third or fourth grade when I like was into it. I was writing like fan fiction like in sixth and seventh grade, but then yeah, I fell out of it for a while because I got bad feedback from people and just didn't write. And I got back into like writing fantasy and just novels just for myself like 10 or 15 years ago. And I had been like into transformation stuff for at least, as that long, but I never kind of combined them. Also, I'd like basically just quit a job that I didn't like, so I was like, I need to do something, and writing is a great outlet for me. So I just started doing it just for my own, enjoyment sort of thing. And then I had people say, "Oh, hey, could you do this story for me? I'll pay you." I'm like, "What? You'll pay me? Okay." One thing after another, and then here I am, sort of.
Pretty good. I mean, sorry, so which part was the tragic interlude?
Oh, the tragic interlude was when, like, there was definitely, like, when I started writing, and then, like, from probably, like, seventh grade until, like, for about, like, 15 years, I just didn't write at all in terms of, like, creatively, sort of, like, through college and all that. Wasn't too much fun. But, yeah, once I was out of that, like, but, like, just falling into transformation stuff, it was just, like, I was something I liked, and I was just reading stuff, I'm like, there wasn't stuff that really clicked with what I wanted to read, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Was the stories that like obviously there's ones I liked, but it was never like something that clicked, so I'm like, I'm just gonna write what I like, and I found I just really like doing my own stuff, so I just kept writing. And
Yep.
I know it sounds uncomplicated, but it's like I just like writing.
Okay, it's more you answered the question in terms of how you got to the position you're in now. When a lot of other people answer the question in their journey of how they ended up figuring out what makes them so into it and on what levels. Why is it a kink for them? Why is it a huge part of their identity? And you answered pretty much why you are writing stuff for money right now.
Oh yeah, more so.
Yeah.
More so like how I guess got into writing TF in general.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're that's why like the TF writing, but if we're talking just transformation.
Were you writing before you were approached for a commission?
Yeah, I was writing I wrote like novels that again like for myself, and I did like other writing. It was like oddly enough, when I was first writing like transformation stuff, I'm like, I'm not sure I can write like nudity and graphic stuff, and that's not really what I usually do. I write more just like action and fun stuff. I'm like, I'll give it a try.
Oh yeah,
Sort of.
Mm.
But like for like self, like I kind of came into it sort of. I always just like more descriptive. Like almost like comic booky type of novels, pulpy Neil Gaiman sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And for transformation, for me, it's very like a mental side of it. So
Yeah.
I think that's kind of
It kind of sounds a little bit like, what's the word, Pulp Fiction-y kind of stuff.
yeah, it's a little bit more like pulpy, sort of not take it a little not too serious, like kind of like tongue in cheek, kind of a little bit of a wink in the camera, but like have some fun, gritty sort of. I don't know,
Yeah.
just like have fun, sort of stories, I guess, is what I like.
Weird.
Well, sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a weird place to break into when you're trying to write porn. When you're not doing it for, I don't know, when you don't aim to do it. I'm not sure how a lot of people end up wanting to do that sort of shit,
Mhm.
but I definitely was in a place where I thought it would be cool if I tried that, but I'll look like a creep and a weirdo. And slowly dip your toes in, and before you know it, when you're drawing nudes, but you're not drawing sex, and then you're drawing like some kind of sex, but you're not drawing penetration,
Yeah.
and
It's like this.
And then you're asking people like, how much penetration do you want?
Yeah. Is it just the tip?
Mm-hmm.
the tip is huge.
The tip is huge. It's true. So then I'm curious then, so you talked a little bit about like kind of your journey. What would you say, like, how would you describe your overall writing process? Like, what are those steps when you like sit down and work through when you're coming up with a new piece?
It kind of depends based on whether it's like a commission or it's just like something I'm like completely doing. But assuming it's like somebody's idea, generally the ones I get now are very, give me a lot of room to do what I want, sort of. But mostly it's just coming up with the idea in my head and sort of just running through the plot,
Right.
start to finish. I always work out where do I want to start, where do I want to end, and then I sort of just flesh out and kind of roll it over in my head over and over. Sort of just. I don't like physically outline or write anything down. It's just over in my head a lot. And usually I'm like trying to come up like what's the narrative here? What's pulling through the story? What's the good dynamic? What are some fun characters I can do? Obviously the length of the story takes up, precedent in what they want. But generally it's just like trying to think like what's the most entertaining story I can get. That also, if it's a commission or a request, it's like how can I also hit all the points that they want, and then usually it's exceed expectations, or like how can I be like a little extra in a way that they didn't expect, or the way the reader didn't expect, sort of. Is not like trying to always subvert expectation, but try to give something like a little beyond just the normal stuff you get in a story. If I can. Obviously not every story can be out of the park amazing, but
Yeah, you put forth a good faith effort to try and exceed expectations, be it through like a subversion or like, oh, she really went there, that kind of a thing.
yeah, that's sort of just trying to like what can be fun with this, even if it's just sort of like I'm just gonna have some crazy characters doing some funny stuff or that sort of thing. Is just that can be entertaining enough for me.
Yeah.
It feels like the way you're describing your process, or at least your thought process, is kind of like you're orchestrating the show to get the biggest kind of reactions. Is that something that you would agree with?
I mean, it's not always like the biggest, but it's like definitely try to get like an emotional response. Whatever emotional response I'm trying to aim for, whether it's trying to be like it's just trying to be hot, then that's just okay. I'll just be hot with this, but be that kind of descriptive. But it's like this person wants it a little bit funny, or maybe they want more touching and heart, or they want a depressing, sad, horrible ending, sort of. So you have to kind of find the fun sort of aspect and everything, which sounds weird saying I gotta find a fun part of someone being horribly tortured, but sort of, but sort of find the fun, find the interesting narrative point, every story, and then try to do my best with it.
Yeah. At the very least, it's like, if the commissioner is asking for something that's on that more tragic, torturous kind of change, you're trying to find a way to elevate it in some way.
Yeah, it's trying not to be like too like just like, oh, so it's just depressing. Like, can we like have some nuance to it, some sort of like, is there something here, it's just shitty sort of cruelty, and it's just usually that's just doesn't do much. At least for me, it's just like pointless cruelty, or just but it's the same on the other side. Like it's like, oh, it's just a TF that happens with no like emotion, or it's just some character changed and ooh, that happened. So that's I kind of like having like the characters that have like a story and everything. So that's definitely like in the process. So then when it's just I write it and then I edit it once and then it's done. Usually it's the actual process.
Seems fine to me. But is this the kind of thought process that you go for your own writing? Do you have time to write for yourself, or is this just the general thought process you have? Is it just for customers?
No, I'd say it's like the general what I'm doing. I mean, it's a little bit different if I'm writing like, for my personal stuff, where I'd say like I try to write more commercial fiction, where it's like for this, I'm like, I'm going to try to write the hottest, sexiest transformations possible, sort of. So I might have like a sort of different goal agenda in that sense. But yeah, I usually just try to make stories that, I like making. I think of myself more as like a storyteller than a writer type. So I try to tell a good story. I try to be amusing. But with my own stuff, usually the biggest difference is I just have much more leeway with, how crazy I can get. It's like usually those are my more weird stories where it's someone's, I usually have like a set beginning and end in the middle I have to work with. But yeah, if it's my own thing, it's off the rails.
I got one more question for you on this like vague ballpark. You said more storyteller than a writer. So what's the difference between a storyteller and a writer?
I would say like it's somewhat like a writer is a storyteller, but the storyteller doesn't necessarily need to be a writer. Like so a storyteller could be like a filmmaker. It's always about having like an audience and you're trying to in a way entertain them, and that doesn't always mean like they're laughing, but getting an emotional response and sort of. Whereas if and not saying like writing's obviously, and how I do it best because I can't draw for shit is writing. So that's my medium.
Did you ever want to?
I've tried. Like my older sister's the artist, I'm the writer, so it's just sort of how it kind of balanced out. I kind of just leaned in like I accept I'm good at writing. I'll kind of stick with that.
All right, that's a different argument.
I'm getting into audio. That's how I'm starting to branch out.
Yeah. No, I think one of the interesting things as well is like trying to be a multimedia storyteller, I guess will be the word that we'll use. Like, I mean, obviously I do visual stuff and this podcast. In terms of writing for me, I used to, but I found that, I didn't necessarily take to it as much, or at the very least, it wasn't as easy for me to like come out with like stuff, I guess. And so I kind of like let that muscle atrophy a little bit to focus on the other ones. So I don't know.
I don't know if it ever really atrophies. I think it develops with time. You get the taste of what you want to express, and then you also start inserting little things that you've learned.
I guess that's true.
And if you think about the stuff that you like, you end up finding out what little touches that you never got to add in before. It's fun that way.
Yeah, no, it definitely can be, but unfortunately there's also only so much time in the day.
Yeah, I know. It'd be great to have 3 times the time for any given day.
Yeah,
I get so much more writing done.
Yeah. So then I'm curious, what would you say some of your like biggest inspirations as a writer are, either like other TF writers or like non-TF writers?
I wouldn't like say like I have like a direct sort of either with TF writers or just writers in general that like I try to like copy or anything. Just because like I've been sort of like writing with the kind of the same style that's developed, like I said, since I was like a little kid, which I think is kind of almost right, like almost like a very detailed screenplay sort of comic booky style. But I kind of adapted it a little. But I can't say that I actively try to like copy or take in anyone's style so much when I write. I just kind of try just to describe the scenes as I'm seeing them kind of like play out in my head, and sort of like almost like not like a play or like a movie sort of scene, but I try to do my best to both convey the feeling what I'm trying to get across and the actual scene itself.
Yeah.
So it's just that's kind of how I approach it, with less than like thinking about like a particular artist that sort of gets me there. Usually when I'm looking at other art, it's sort of like, because I forget how it looks like when a paw is formed on a cat from a hand, or sort of like a reference thing is usually when I have to dip into it.
But no outside influences or the writer?
I was going to say, actually, like, you mentioned being a storyteller. And so I'm wondering, maybe, is there like a visual influence potentially? Like, is there like a specific kind of like vibe you go for that maybe isn't like something that you've seen in written fiction, but you've seen in like other fiction that maybe has inspired you in some way?
Yeah, I would say probably like kind of like I said with like I kind of almost like have like a comic booky type of feel, or like maybe probably some people don't get that impression when they read it, but I kind of get a very sort of detailed graphic novel type of feeling to some of the way I kind of describe, if there was anything that kind of inspired.
Like Watchmen or something?
Yeah, like I may like watch it more like maybe like a Neil Gaiman type of
Okay.
type of that sort of
No, that makes sense to me. I mean, Neil Gaiman's a great person to look up to, in my opinion. He does amazing stuff. So
Yeah.
I definitely grew up with like Chris Claremont and like comic books. This is kind of where I got like I grew up like where I grew up more, and movies too, and TV definitely had like an influence, like more that's like weird, like more because like even like when I read now, pretty much all the stuff I read that's not like my own writing is based like nonfiction history stuff. So
well, that makes sense. One thing I've also noticed as well, and I guess like moving into like some of the specifics of your writing, one thing that's clearly very dear to your heart is like writing strong magic wielding women in various stories. And so I'm curious, like, what drew you to that sort of character archetype? And is there like an element of perhaps wish fulfillment there for yourself?
I mean, it's probably some. Personally, I'm more of like a switch when it comes to that sort of aspect of things. So it's like I can definitely be, but I think it's kind of like I'm wondering like, which came first because like I like writing those. I like kind of like writing any sort of dynamic, powerful, sort of showy characters, and I feel like I kind of like tried to do men and women at the start, but I think especially when it comes to requests and stuff like commissions, like people like strong female characters of all types of shapes is usually the dominant type. So I'm like, well, I'm more than happy to do that. And I try to at least explore like different ones where, some are far more evil or straight up demonic, whereas some are sweeter and more nice, but yet still controlling. So I try to at least get somewhat of a spectrum. But I think it's just, they're just fun sort of characters, especially if they're just evil characters, or just, especially when it's like magic. It's like they can just do whatever they want and torch you however they feel like it, and they can just have such fun with it. So as a writer, it just gives you a lot to work with.
Would you say that because picking on the evil magic wielding women for a second, do you find it like interesting from a storytelling perspective that like because they are like so far and away from potentially the normal like moral axes, it gives you more possibilities when you're writing the story? Or do you find it interesting from like a different angle that maybe I'm not keying into?
No, yeah, I think it's definitely the magic aspect has it, because it just gives them, something that's, doesn't matter who are they going against, whether they're, what the person is, rich, guy, girl, doesn't matter. It's like the magic's just gonna not level it, just drop them and like put the woman, puts her in power. So I think it's sort of like it just works, like I said, from a creative point, because you can do whatever you want with it. Like she can be very manipulative down to like teasing you for like, now you have a hoof, or whatever it's gonna be. Magic just gives you that ability to do it, and people definitely have a connection more when it's like a female character doing it over like a male character. Like I said, certainly, at least that's my experience. That just could be like I write women well, like in that. So then maybe people then ask for it. So it's sort of a wag the dog type of thing. So I'm not sure which sides, but I definitely I've enjoyed writing them. They're definitely fun. Like I said, especially when they're evil and that's sort of like they can. I think it's that, especially with magic, they can just control every single minutia, and they can be like a little old woman or this frail little thing. But with magic, they'll just be able to. Doesn't matter what you do. They'll just be able to. So it allows them to be basically whatever, because they just have magic, and it lets them do anything they want. So I think this gives possibilities for what kind of character you can do.
So why can't Doctor Doom just win? He uses magic and science.
Because he secretly just wants to save his mom from Mephisto. He's not a bad guy.
No, he's not.
He's a great ruler.
But he should be able to win. Finally. With that being said, so you find power, just the greater power just lies within just fucking being evil?
I would say it's not the greater power is evil. I'd say it's just more fun to write. For like a really good character, you can kind of like make him kind of like almost like a twisted sort of goodness. There's definitely, but evil is just like, it's just sort of fun. They're just right evil characters, and even, sort of acting them out in my head, it's just easier. It's like, they're just so evil and crazy. You can just go off the wall and
so why Dr. Robotnik and not Sonic the Hedgehog?
I wasn't. I sadly didn't grow up a lot of video games.
No. But I'm trying to say the reason I use those two specifically is because Sonic is supposed to be a good guy who's also a pain in the ass. People like him despite his generally shitty attitude toward them.
Yeah, we were just talking about this because of Sonic Prime, but sorry, continue.
Yeah, and so that's what I'm talking about. There are those good characters, not anti-heroes like Shadow.
Yeah, that's my man.
But you got Sonic, who's kind of a prick, but he does the right thing because that's actually what he feels like doing, and that's fun. And then you got Dr. Robotnik. His face is everything. His face will be everything. He wants theme parks. He will make them as bright, as deadly, as dumb as he wants. They are both essentially the same kind of fucking moron. And that's one of the reasons Sonic Boom was such a brilliantly written show, was because they could get along because they're essentially the same kind of person with two different ends. So that's why I'm wondering, why Dr. Robotnik and not Sonic?
I think when it comes to like, especially if I'm doing like a short story and it's like, well, I gotta have sort of a very flashy character. And if I'm going to do like a very nuanced sort of character, that generally takes a little bit longer to develop. So I'd probably say it's something of an ease thing to just do a very this straight up evil. Plus, it's just, I mean, honestly, I just think it's a little bit more fun generally. But like then doing the Shades of Grey is still doing like,
So you just like it
you
more.
know, oh yeah, it's just like this. I don't know.
Okay.
I hope it doesn't say anything about my certain proclivity toward evil.
No, I will chime in and say again, showing a bit of my ass here when it comes to like D&D stuff. Some of my favorite characters to create are the campy villains because it's like, yeah, they're over the top and they're evil, so you kind of know what their like game is going to be from like square one, and it defines it well for the audience. And also, like, camp is fun. Camp is good.
Yeah. There's lots of fun there. It's like even if they're evil, it's like they can still be like funny and they can still have emotions and have. It's like they're not just like. I mean, yeah, if you make like a demon or something, they can just be pure evil. But assuming there's some sort of human or something, they're gonna have a personality beyond just I just really hate you and I'm gonna turn you into a pig or something.
Well, then what you got really isn't evil so much as the misunderstood one. But I know what you're getting at, and I don't want to get too into the whole spectrum of that. But I just really just wanted to know that you just think it's more fun. I get why people have more fun with that. When you're good, everybody has a lot of problems being good. Being raised to be good means doing all this shit that ultimately hurts you. And so now the idea of evil, in quotations, however that manifests or however that's expressed, is a lot of fun. Because if the world sucks, then you can be whatever is evil to the world, and then you feel free. And, that's fun. So I get it.
Yeah, I would say like I look at like it's very just like I wouldn't even say like I go in thinking like this one's gonna be evil. It's like more like this one's gonna do something against a person's will, and usually it's like how it's like if you could change like just using certain like one or two different words can change a person, like how a character is viewed from being like they're evil but misunderstood to just wow they're just a horrible person. Little touches, but yeah, it's more never try to do this purely evil ones, but yeah, like good characters. I guess I like good characters more on the opposite end of the bad characters is more get that good sort of dichotomy and back and forth. But two evil characters is also fun.
Yeah, evil versus evil can be fun. We will touch on this more with the bad end stuff, but I want to move on a little bit to the mental change stuff because you do a lot of it in your stories, and I was curious as to like how you conceptualize approaching writing mental changes. Like, what things do you feel make a mental TF satisfying for readers to see?
I think I mean, for me, I think I kind of like going. It sort of depends. Especially if I'm going like a positive one, I find people like. I think I've even done polls for this. People kind of like the sort of I have instincts, but I'm still in control. So, assuming we're talking like person to like an animal type of thing, where they still want control, but they want some sort of instinct. Almost, can be a few different reasons, but that's kind of like the preferred thing. And usually, if I'm going that angle, it's sort of very subtle, sort of like hey, like my interest or personal, like instead of being attracted to this, I'm attracted to this, and rather than wanting to eat pizza, I want to, have oats, sort of. Just subtle sort of changes. But if it's more of a evil or sort of, then it's like an invasive. It's sort of like, I kind of almost like when I do with the very unwilling ones, it's almost like, I kind of try to pick like an anxiety attack, almost like it's setting in, you can feel it, you can't stop it. It's taking you like sort of just subtly setting in, well, sometimes subtle. But just sort of creeping in either, it could be anything from like that sort of intrusive, like roots digging into your brain or sort of this, it's, it's also how much the person is aware of what's happening to them. So it's like, do they know that their, mental changes are coming, or are they sort of like unaware and it's just sort of slowly slipping away from them and they don't really realize it? So, I mean, all those can be fun depending on what story I'm doing, but just trying to do the thinking and trying to play it out, and not like it's tricky to do with try to play a transformation logically when it can't happen, but to be like, all right, well, what would happen? Like, and obviously being usually using magic over science, which, just makes it like, of course, even though it's like they can still think as a human, even though they're a mouse, and that shouldn't even be possible, but we're going to say it's possible
Yeah.
for the sake of, story sort of thing. But
Yeah, you always gotta have a little bit of suspension of disbelief there.
yeah, plus I always find like I gotta do like the mental changes like last, because then the person can still think and talk and react up to that point in the transformation. So it's also why I like gotta leave the face last and a change when I'm writing. So I'm like, well, they can't say anything, and that kind of cuts down on dialogue. So
You don't really need dialogue too much when you're writing. That's the good thing. If you have nothing going on with writing, you can fill it with all kinds of thoughts. You can fill it with descriptors. You can make a lot of choices with that. And if you have something visual, you still have to work out with a way to tell somebody, oh, this is the sort of thing that's probably going to happen, or expressing the situation they're in, putting them in interesting places, keeping things moving along. You can do that without any talking. It's been done plenty of times.
That's true, yeah.
Oh yeah, I can definitely. 100%. I think it's like, for me, it's just like the evil characters. I just like dialogue. It's a little bit easier. It's a little bit more show than it is tell when it comes to storytelling, where I can just convey a lot more through some conversation than I can through just description. What descriptions and details and such I use. So it obviously depends on the story, but I always find dialogue is be a little rewarding, fun way. I enjoy it as an aspect, especially when I'm doing audio recordings. It can be something to actually say.
So you like banter more than anything?
Well, yeah, banter back and forth. It doesn't.
Yeah,
it can be like meaningful dialogue, but yeah, banter is good. Just messages across better than sometimes than anything I could say.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Are there any like mental changes that you don't like to explore in your writing?
I mean, generally, I'm pretty open within like what I do. I mean, I've done full on identity death to just obviously like nothing to very minor things. I think when it comes to just, I wouldn't want to do like anything that's like too overwrought or torturous for just like no reason. Sort of would need to have like some sort of, again, like narrative or some sort of push for it to happen. But I guess there wouldn't be. I'm not super great with like twinning, sort of like copying another person's brain.
Oh yeah.
Is sort of, it's just always very weird. Like, I just don't do twinning in general, but mentally I wouldn't probably do that. That's a little bit too cloney, sort of weird to me.
Yeah, and it sounds like, at least from the like, if you're writing a punishment angle, for example, it sounds like you'd rather there at least be a reason for it to happen, rather than like, oh, there's not really reason, and now you're going to undergo these like torturous mental changes or something.
punishment implies a reason.
Yeah, I guess that does. You're right.
Yeah,
That's a good point.
Otherwise, it's just torture.
Yeah, then it's just torture. You're right.
But also, punishment can become torture.
Yes.
You can always overstep it. One doesn't necessarily mean the other, but they can easily exist together.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it's a fine line of sort of walking the sort of, it's trying to like actually building up characters. I think helps that, so it's not just story starts, person's just being tortured, what's going on, story ends, like what was that all about, sort of.
Well, I guess building on that too, like generally speaking, you've covered a really wide range of species and concepts within your writing, including things like CTF and inanimate TF2. And I know that many of these come from, commissioner requests, but how do you personally feel about tackling such a broad range? Like, how do you approach writing for a species you've never written for before, for example?
Oh, I mean, I like it, sort of. I like the sort of challenges with writing, so that's why, like, when I pick stories and assuming when I get to pick, sort of, I like to pick things that are different. I don't like writing the same story like over and over. I like try if I can help it, like I don't do a lot of sequels to stories, just because like what else can I say about it? Like I already did it, sort of. And when I get requests for sequels, it usually just do the same thing over, slightly different, which doesn't like super excite me. So it's always interesting to try like some different species that I haven't heard of, haven't done, or some sort of merging or some weird beast I've never even, conceptualized. Because like, all right, well, that's like a challenge of how am I going to do this, sort of, whether, and that can be like, whether that be like the species or how the transformation happens. It's like, that's different. I haven't done that before. I'll give it a shot, sort of. That's how I approach it.
All right. Do you generally enjoy the kind of work that you get requested for?
Yeah, I would say like these days, especially like I know when I was first starting out, I would take sort of like anything I could get, and that got me a queue of like 40 plus people. I'm like, oh, I should probably put like a limit on this. But yeah, especially like the past couple years though, I found people like, especially since I have enough content out, people generally are always already kind of looking for something that's, in the range of what I'm gonna be doing. So usually it's like people like are already picking something that's in my wheelhouse, and especially if it's like through Patreon, I try to be a little bit more open to what I'm doing. Especially it kind of depends on the length of the story. It's like 5,000 words or like 7,000 words. It's like whatever, I can write that in like a day or two. It's not. I'll try anything as long as it's not like something really against my senses or something really boring. But
Hmm.
I can usually try like anything.
Did you ever accept a story where somebody just wanted a nice time or something to enjoy or generally pleasant experience involving somebody turning into something else?
Yeah, I mean, I literally I have a story called "Something to Enjoy," because for them. But yeah, it's just where I think it's anthros, and it's just people like enjoying it, sort of thing. So I have a fair like amount of stories, especially when I try to make like shopkeeper stories like more positive if I can try to do it. So I try to work in not always unwilling, sad, depressing stuff if I can.
Do you feel like you get those far less frequent than the other ones with like the punishments and everything?
Yeah, I would say unwilling. Like I wouldn't say maybe like evil or punishment, but unwilling changes are definitely a lot more requested when it
Yeah,
comes to yeah, definitely like unwilling scenarios are
yeah, that
very popular.
definitely is what I expected.
Yeah, that tracks with my impression too. A lot of people
Yeah.
are into that and chomping at the bit for more.
Yep.
I'm also curious, something I noticed in your stuff, you don't tend to work with like pre-existing characters from like media writ large. Is there like a reason behind that or
Yeah, I mean it kinda it's because I think it's mostly because I don't like, working with other people's characters. I'm like, well, anything I can do is basically an approximation of what their work is, and so I feel like it's just like I'm not going to be able to do it properly or do it justice. So I don't want to sort of do it for that reason. The other reason is I feel like it's a bit too restrictive for me. Like if I'm working with a predefined character, that's who they are is who they are, sort of. Whereas if it's a character I create, or even it's like a facsimile of a similar character, I can still, change things around with their story if I need to. Because, like, I know when I write, I do a lot of audibles and will change things as I'm writing. If I get like a better idea, I'll, erase what I've, thousands of words and be like, well, this is a better idea. So, fine, when you're working with like set characters, there's just a lot some more restriction on what you can do, and I guess I just don't really like working with that. And I did a couple stories with that, and like I said, it's just sort of it's restrictive, and I just rather go.
When you're trying to do somebody else's character or somebody else's stuff, you may get caught up in trying to make it so it's like what the other person imagines, which is not a thing to do.
it's tricky?
Yeah, it's tricky and it's stressful when it's not annoying. I have done a commission a long time ago where I had to do that with somebody else's character, and remember trying to get it right, and it meant checking with like the limitations, making sense of the story. Why would this happen? If this has happened, if you say this character can do this, then why would this even be possible? All this other kind of stuff, and why would this situation even happen in the first place? And I'm like, no, I don't want to get into that.
Yeah.
Either you're gonna let me do something the way I'm gonna do it or not.
Yeah, and with the written form in particular, I feel like it's just so much more difficult because you have to like opine so much more and like get the personality right, and it becomes a big mess.
Yeah, the only time I
Yeah,
feel that kind of thing could possibly get easier, because you mentioned other people's characters and properties, is if you're already into the thing. If you're already into the thing, the interpretation you could take or leave, or at least you can get a foothold on something. That's if that ends up happening, which
Mhm.
that's a different situation depending on the kind of creator you are. Yeah.
it's just sort of like for me, it's like even when I think I did something for chess, I was like, I'm just doing someone else's character. Okay, I'll just do my best, sort of. Just yeah, it just makes me just too nervous. I'm like, oh, this is easier if I just make it up.
Yeah.
Are there any tropes that you dislike seeing in writing or like for TF like you wish there were less of?
It's not like a particular, say, like sort of trope that I want to see. Like most of my things I just don't like are just things I just are annoy me in writing in general. With people just kind of like doing flat characters or people who write dialogue where it's I don't think they've ever like spoke human like to a human before, sort of. Just like that's not how people talk, and this formatting things. There's nothing like particular. I feel like within transformation, like I said, other than like I just feel like I read a lot, and this is kind of like what got me into TF writing was I just read a lot of characters where there was just no development. They were just clearly they were just like kind of fake characters for the reader to sort of put themselves into, but there just was nothing. I didn't care what it was happening to the characters, so like for me it's not like just the transformation that's happening. There's also like the mental aspect, there's the emotion to it, and sometimes they're just very descriptive and there's just no like heart or emotion to it, so it just doesn't lands very flat to me.
Apparently you got a thing for bad endings, or at least you end up doing it a lot. And I would think that part of a bad ending sometimes doesn't necessarily feature like a transformation either. A lot of that is kind of like epilogue stuff, and if you're going to do all that dark stuff at the end, and with all the unwilling changes in the permanence and the identity death and everything like that, it's just something that you can't really like keep fitting that into if it's going to be like the final chapter or something. But it would be good to better understand what about that kind of like fascinates you, because I did notice that being a trend in your stuff too, because I did take the time to read a bit of it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I would say like, especially with a lot of the endings, with every story, I try to like get their little snippets, like stuff happened before, even if it's not covered, and stuff happens after the story, whether it's not covered, sort of, so it feels, like it's a living world wherever it's written out of. So I think, especially with a lot of the bad endings, I try to give a forethought to like the future, like you're a cow, you're a horse, you're a mouse. Like I think I like a lot of stories where it's not just sort of bad endings, it's sort of that more than you bargained for type of thing, where it's you thought you thought you wanted this, but you didn't. This is actually what a cow's life or something like this is life, and just having that sort of like it's definitely for me. It's like focusing on the mental side of it. I think the part that I like is I like sort of leaning into transformation stuff, because I think a lot of stuff I read was always very the thing is like we're all here for transformation, but we do like I read a lot of stories that just didn't accept that sort of thing, and I feel like it's a lot more recently. I know I've done it too, where you're leaning into it more. It's like you want this sort of thing, and I think playing with that and like with the unwilling bad endings, where it's like, is this what you really want? Is this what you think you want? And it's sort of, I guess I like playing with like consequences of actions and things like that. And I would say like I don't like, even in my own head, like I might say like a story, like even if I might never write a sequel and it seems like a person might never change back, like my headcanon might be like, well, maybe they did change back, or if I didn't specifically say they never did, they might, sort of thing. So I mean, I think some bad endings are like, some people think, wow, that was a really sad ending. I'm like, it didn't feel like too sad to me. Like, it could have made it sadder, but
it's almost like it's not a bad ending. It's a bad open ending, is what I'm kind of hearing.
Yeah, I think it's like, it's well, I think for a lot of people, it's anything but like you got exactly the transformation you wanted, and you got to have hot sex, and it was amazing, and you transformed back, and you were a human, and everything's fine and perfect, and those stories are fun, and there's a lot of them, but it's like, oh, let's find somewhere it's like, it was fun, and oh wait, I can't transform back, and oh no, I have to, be in a field or a sty or whatever it is, and this isn't so easy, sort of, whatever,
Yeah, I remember there was one story you wrote, and I'm blanking on the name now, so forgive me on this, but I remember there was a story where some guy got, I think it was like a potion or something from a shopkeep, and it was like he did want the changes, but then it got to the point where it was like, oh, now I realize that I've kind of been duped and I'm getting more than what I bargained for, and this is going to be kind of a permanent thing. And I feel like maybe that's kind of like the perfect example of what you're talking about in terms of like the things you like to see.
Yeah, that's sort of, I feel like a lot of transformation stories are about like, oh, you made a wish that was stupid, or you messed up a spell or something, but I kind of like ones where it's like, you actually wanted to transform into a cow because, yeah, that's hot. Like, we all agree, so, like,
It's evil genie logic.
Exactly. Like, now let's have some fun with it. And, sometimes it works out and they change back and it's fine. And other times, and a lot of other times it doesn't. Or like, maybe they change back, but they had to spend a year or two where, whatever it may be. But it's like trying to explore more of the consequences. And I think it's a little bit more it just for me, like, it's a little entertaining part of it because that doesn't usually get touched on, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting because I know, and this kind of ties back to some of the conversation with the mental changes, like, especially when it comes to bad ends and like unwilling TFs, oftentimes like the mental changes are a big part of it. And, you have like these permanent changes, potentially like an identity death, etc. So when it comes to depicting those in your stories, how do you feel about working them in and depicting them and making it also not just like oh, this is a bad ending? Like, how do you like try to bring a little bit of like unique flair to it, I guess is what I'm trying to ask.
I mean, I think that's where few elements come in where like the evil person who's changing them or whatever changing them, like if it's that type of element, I could play up like what they're gonna do with them afterwards is some fun thing to play with it. If they're like by themselves, like I try to think like they're in their apartment right now. What are they gonna do? They're in their house, or, like I try to think out like where they're gonna finish up and how is this gonna go after. Which is probably why I don't do a lot of fish because that just would be really have to restrict where everything happens next to an ocean or an aquarium. But yeah, I could try to just. And then when it's like a negative sort of ending, like it really comes down to like how much I want to make the person aware of how horrible it's going to be. I think sometimes, and whether like they're going to have control or not. Because like I feel like the worst ending in terms of it's not even like identity death because that can almost be like just normal death to people, or it's that sort of awareness that like you're going to be completely out of control, but you'll be in there. You just won't be able to do anything.
Oh, that's being a prisoner in your own body.
Yeah,
exactly. It's that. Yeah, it's
Terrifying.
Exactly. Not just like horrible. And I've done those a couple of times. I try to avoid those at least. But yeah, those are just like when I'm doing those. I find it's like just the awareness of the person changing, and that by extension the reader has of what's about to happen to them. Like, did they know they were going to lose their mind from the beginning, or was it just like at the very end? I think that plays into also how impactful and sort of evil it feels, where it's like if you know from the very start you're just going to be a mindless animal, sort of. It's almost like actual death. Like if you knew it's coming versus if you just like didn't sort of passed away when you were sleeping, is like if it just suddenly happens. But it's just like how much awareness do they have about it? How much is it rubbed in? It's coming from an outside source, but and this sort of just playing with their mental state up until that moment, and then assuming that they still can, and that kind of echoing what they're going to be feeling sort of in the future without ever, I try to be more descriptive of what's happening after without actually saying what's happening, just to make the readers, have that feeling of mystery where you can sort of insert your own bad misery things or whatever you want.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So that's understood clearly.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I'm curious then as well because like obviously this ties in, I think, especially with like the bad endings that have like the unwilling element. Like this is, I think, even goes beyond like, oh, you got more than you bargained for. But like, I'm gonna use quotations here. Obviously, people can't see this, but like, the pure unwilling TF of like, oh, this is a punishment that is being doled out to you or whatever, and you definitely didn't want this, and it's going to happen anyways. I feel like there are thorny issues that can introduce themselves, namely around like the depiction of non-con in the situation. So I'm curious how you like navigate writing that kind of a trope, and if you have any like concern about how those depictions are then received.
Yeah, it's definitely like one of those fine line sort of things. There's definitely times where I've, written sort of your very unwilling sort of. I think recently I did one, sort of like a sci-fi one where a person's like kind of transformed into a horse, sort of. And that was just completely unwilling, completely horrible sort of sci-fi space horror. I mean, I kind of, sort of how I wrapped my mind around it was just sort of, it was a very out of this sort of world, well, literally out of this world, sort of like this out fantasy, and it's like, I guess I think more of like aliens and like other horror movies. I think when I get into those sort of horrible unwilling elements, it's I don't think of them anymore as sort of like erotic stories. I kind of switch into this like tortures, not like torture, like more horror.
Right.
And that's sort of how like I switch over in my head, I think, as I'll switch. I'm like, all right, this is gonna be, I'm gonna write this as like a sci-fi horror story, not as like and that's just my approach.
Yeah.
how I'm gonna do it.
So you almost try to like take the theme and put it into a scenario that's so fantastical that it detaches it a little bit from the normal like reality of like a quote unquote TF story is what I'm kind of hearing.
Yeah, I mean, TF's like gonna be, kind of by its definition, a little bit always fantasy out
Of
there.
course. Yeah.
With it. So, but yeah, with the very, it's like I try to make it very out there. I try like usually the villain is so over the top, like it's like a Venom sort of demon, just completely evil, never reproachable. Sort of like obviously this person is you never want to be this person.
This means that in those cases you try to not make it a horny story.
I mean, sometimes yeah, like I would say like with the body horror ones, I don't try to make it a horny story. Yeah, sometimes people are like, wow, that was really hot. I'm like, okay, I wasn't trying to, but thumbs up, sort of.
Yeah, that's how that works usually.
Yeah.
I know that for sure. But yeah,
Yeah, no, I am curious, like, what would you say the dividing line is between body horror and like horny TF that's a little bit like out there?
I mean, you're probably getting into like the pain is a big one. People will like have like some level of pain, but I'm like talking like if you really describe excruciating, horrible, rending pain, get a lot of blood in there, sort of.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely going into more of the mental horror. I usually in those like there's no mental loss because then it's like you're fully aware of what's happening, so it's even worse in that case. Whereas I feel like with when you're writing something more erotic, I tend to write. I feel like my descriptive words go from like excruciating and horrible and painful to like arousing and heated and sensual and things like that. You just kind of switch your words around, and that does everything.
you can make that horrifying too.
Oh yeah, you can make anything horrifying, I guess.
I mean, but yeah, but a lot of people probably look at some of the stuff that I think is normal hot, and they're like, "What the?"
Yeah. I definitely agree though. Like to some extent, like you can make anything horrifying, but especially within this space, I think like people see words like heated or like whatever and like read into it a certain tone, which I don't think actually happens in like for example, if you were doing just like a pure body horror story and it was like not being written within the TF community or like with the TF community in mind, I feel like those are clearer in the sense of like you could use that language and someone would still be like, oh, that's horrifying.
Well, that's the thing about this space. The things that are scary to most people are just attractive to us.
Yeah.
So you have a hard time making it. You have a hard time making it really scary to people without making it. In order for people to get that sort of sense of horror or aversion to it, you just have to make it an objectively terrible experience. And they're just like, well, that wasn't fun. And I'm like, well, yeah, asshole, because otherwise you just want to get horny.
Yeah, you gotta go the real extra mile to make it like,
Yeah, just make a poof TF, and then you transformed in a second. Haha.
Yeah.
Oh, I've seen that. It was like, oh no, I'm turning into a human. Help me! Like, oh please, please. Get over yourself.
Yeah. Well, then I'm curious. Are there any bad endings that you feel are like completely off the table when it comes to commissions?
I mean, I wouldn't do like just. Usually, it's like there has to be like a reason it sort of ends. I probably wouldn't like describe like they got turned to a cow. Now describe the slaughter process. They took them to the killing floor. And like, yeah, I'm not gonna go into like that level of detail. It's more like if we would probably like I like more just like leaving them open with the idea of what could happen, but without strictly saying specifically what happened. But yeah, I wouldn't say like I just wouldn't. Yeah, just physically describing this horrible shit just for the sake of it wouldn't really. It doesn't really enlighten or add anything to the story. I'm just not going to do it. Sort of.
No, that makes sense to me, I think.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. I get that. From there, I guess there's curiosity about the dichotomy between the subject and the person that gets shit. Like, the TFer versus the TFE.
I like that language.
Mm-hmm.
I don't.
Well, I wrote the outline, so too bad.
Write it better.
Okay, fine. But sorry,
I'll be your editor.
Okay, go on, whatever.
Just
ask the question.
You got stories that depict someone getting turned by somebody directly, so they are the one, specifically doing it. and then and then they're just interacting with one another while they're like, oh yeah, you're the one doing this to me, yes, I am the one doing this to you. And I don't know, what do you like to bring, what kind of dynamics do you like to bring with those? Because that isn't, yeah, that's like not too many stories, I guess. Usually they're just happening, but to have somebody
Yeah.
just being like, yes, here I am, I'm doing the thing to you.
Yeah, it's very prevalent in Kate's work, I find.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think it's it's because I like dialogue, so I like back and forth. It's something that transforming in a void, sort of just like in the forest by yourself is fine, but it's just sort of it's happening. I like interactions. I like whether it's going to be with some positive force, so, it's like a nice fairy or it's some witch helping them, or it's some evil person or demon or whatever it is. It's like I like that.
So what is it about the interactions that actually elevates it for you?
Well, I think it's just, I feel like dialogue is just very good at both, getting across action. I think it's sort of, like, it really connects with people. I find this connects, like, when I'm reading a story, descriptions and everything are nice for me, and obviously they get a lot of job done, but it's like, they don't feel like real people if they're not talking, and I guess in my mind, even if they're not human characters per se, it's like, some sort of talking and some sort of back and forth is good, and especially I like
Yeah, but
if I can get 2 or 3 characters in there to have a good sort of
but
back and forth. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, but what is it? Like I said, like you can have those things, but if you'd rather have those, what is the elevation for you? Because you said you could have it and it's fine if they're just by themselves. People could do that and paint it as an intimate experience. I do that a lot. That's what I prefer. I like the idea of being as in touch with the process of change as possible, whether it's yourself or the person with you. So that being said, that's what elevates the intimacy, the loneliness, the solitude of doing it by yourself.
Gotcha. All right.
So what does the interaction bring to you?
I think it brings for me is like it's almost like a sounding board. So the person has like not just their thoughts, like, and yeah, yours is like that's very good, like to be able to think about it themselves. I kind of like they think about it themselves because I carry the mental aspect, but then they get to talk out loud to the person, whether it's being a willing or unwilling sort of thing. Like they can discuss like how do you like, whether it's do you like what you're doing or how does it feel, or if it's a more negative interaction, it's like I don't like this. It's that's if a person can talk, then someone can like change their mind or give them a different opinion that they weren't thinking about at the time, or a different perspective, because if it's just them, they're probably going to be a little bit more single tracked to how they're going to think, whereas if there's 2 or 3 people in a room, like, and it can be I even like where it's like 2 people are changing at the same time, even if there's not like a person changing them. It's like just being able to have dialogue sort of, for me, it just adds more than just describing it. It makes the characters feel a lot more real to me.
Mhm.
Or just whereas where it's just by themselves, they're just kind of like, not that it's bad, and it's just that I think what elevates just having more people is this, aside from doing this more changes potentially, is just being able to talk back and forth.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think they can just add more thoughts to, like we're doing right now. It's more in conversation you can get out than if I was just like, talking by myself the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I can maybe project a little bit, it feels like there's like an element of like dominance and submission in play that you're trying to like feed into in terms of like the direct like back and forth between the person who's changing and the person who's doing the changing. Do you conceptualize it in like a BDSM kind of way at all, or do you feel that's like this what you're writing is separate from that traditional dom sub relationship?
I mean, I don't think of it in like a traditional like sort of sub-dom. I just think of more of like this character is in control, like this character is this, and that puts them in control in the situation, and this character is this, and then that puts them in, a more submissive kind of role with it, and then I just kind of play it out with sort of just the characters, like kind of, I come up with the characters, and I kind of just throw them back and forth at each other with the dialogue, and come up with what I, try to come up with their characters through the dialogue, because I find that this shows off who they are a lot more than just, physically describing it. And then with the submissive and sort of that, again, it's just it's a very good stage to sort of get that across, I think.
Okay, so that's pretty much your favorite way. You like to have people talk to things, and maybe that speaks to the storyteller aspect that you're going. Stories being told between two people.
Yeah, I'd say it's more like I guess I think of it more like a play almost, right? Well, not like a one-person play where you got to have there's actors.
Yeah, but it's a performance, and I think that was kind of established at the start, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That's a theme then.
Yeah.
So you feel like the best kind of performance, at least, let's say for a stage, because ideally that's one of the things that we think of when we think of a performance, is that having a couple of people to bounce their personalities and clash. I feel like there's a lot of elements of conflict, and you like to have as much conflict as possible. And usually, I guess the conflict is something that comes from without more than anywhere else. Is what I'm getting about your impressions, what you like to include in your writing, and what you like to pretty much give to people for entertainment. That sound like a decent characterization?
Yeah. Conflict is definitely like interactions with people. I wouldn't say it's the best per se, but it's more the way that seems to work for me, and I'm
not the best.
I enjoy portraying. Yeah,
that's what you like.
Because
what I do is not the best for everyone. I've caught enough of that to know that. But I do what I like. So I'm just talking about what you like, because whether you're doing it for money or not, you're going to be doing what you like.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. I wouldn't be doing I happily don't have to do stories anymore that I don't like. So
good. We always love when people get paid to do the stuff that they actually like. That is what should always happen. So, and I guess like kind of like building off of what you were just saying about like the characters and what you were saying too, Libra, about like kind of the performance aspect. Like I feel like there's definitely a lot of like camp that I read sometimes into like the way you portray some of your characters, which I love camp, to be clear. And I think it's an area where like balancing realism versus camp can make or break a piece depending on which of the two you're going for, because various readers or people who are looking to your writing may be expecting one thing and then they might get another or whatever. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is, how do you try to either bring realism into the interactions or alternatively play up the camp angle?
Yeah, I would say bringing in the realism usually comes kind of both, is like through dialogue, like you're just talking about, as try to make people sound like real people when they're talking. But then you can get the camp in there really easily by having like, I try to have like with shopkeeper stories, I try to have some interaction with like the assistant in them, and the sort of upbeat, sort of positive, sort of bantery, sort of chit chat. But then it's definitely, you have to set the tone for each story. Like, some stories it's going to be very weird if I just threw in banter in the middle of a very sort of hot, sordid scene. But yeah, it's definitely just, you set the tone sort of early on in the story with what you're kind of doing. You try to keep it sort of through there. I do tend to, I think, lead more towards the camp, because go towards, like you said, the base people are kind of reading this, for transformation. They want that sort of aspect. So I'm like, I'm just trying to have fun with it, is kind of when I would always fall back on over realism, just because, like I said, like fantasy, with transformation just being a fantasy, it's like, well, then I'll just lean more towards the crazy than towards the real, usually, more often than not.
Do you feel like leaning into camp kind of steps over I think you mentioned before that you want people to sound, you want to sound like real people interacting?
Yeah, it's definitely like a line of like, have them sound like real people, but not like saying like, wow, that's like the perfect thing someone would say, sort of. That's like trying to find it's a balancing act of like, that's like watching like any movie where it's like, wow, people actually talk like that, and like, oh wow, I don't know anyone who talks like that, sort of.
Why are you balancing them?
I think of like, for me, it's just like the narrative, and like when you're reading it, if it sounds off, it's not unbalanced, then you're gonna be like, oh, that sounds weird. And if that happens too often when you're reading a story, at least for me, like it tends to be like, oh, I don't want to read this story, or I'm not like, I keep getting thrown off by something. So I try to keep the consistency and try to keep the story moving forward at all times. So people, whether it's, through transformation or some sort of, other motion, it's moving things forward, whether it being plot or developing the character, just try to keep things moving forward. And,
I get that. You're trying to keep a flow, and the flow
Yeah.
with everything like camp and everything. I mean, camp and flow are two different things, really.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can do that in a number of ways.
Yeah.
You don't have to. Okay, there's a way to be like consistent but absurd.
Mhm.
I think of Beavis and Butthead.
Yeah,
Beavis and
that
Butthead-
is consistent but
Beavis and
absurd.
Butthead do not talk
Oh,
like real
yeah.
people because they're
Yeah.
incredibly stupid. The people around them do,
Yeah.
but they just get to exist and they interact with these people, and the absurdity kind of kicks up even more when they are saying the dumb shit that they are, but they're speaking to Beavis and Butthead. At least some of them. Some of the people are speaking to them like they know what they're talking about, or they have just this very reasonable interpretation of something that they are not saying.
Yeah. They're trying to like read realism into camp almost.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
So they're just like I'm here to hook up with chicks. You know, they go to the dating center where they get to put up a video profile for themselves. An
Uh-huh.
episode that they did, and everybody found them like reasonable and charming, and all they are up there is ranting about how they want to score. And real women call them back actually wanting to date them and fuck them, and they have no idea what's going on because they're too stupid to remember that they gave them fake names.
Oh, that's really funny. I haven't seen this episode,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. Basically, it's as long as you're consistent within the story with the characters, like as long as your characters are consistently campy or absurd, whether what situation you put them in,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
you can go crazy with it. So, but yeah, it's mostly just if you have a character that's campy, they have to stay campy.
Yeah.
'Cause if they're campy and then real and then campy again, then it's
Oh no, you can do that too.
Yeah.
It's like when Beavis makes a very intelligent point and then Butthead just slaps him for it. That's not
Well,
that's
that
well,
is
I guess-
tonal consistency because it's like, oh, you veered off of the tonal consistency, and then you like self-corrected with another character, which can be very fun.
I guess that'd be a little more
Yeah.
self-referential. I guess like more like this character's being really fun-loving. Oh, all of a sudden they're being very dour and very thoughtful for no reason, and then all of a sudden they're laughing again. Then they just seem like they're psychotic.
Yeah,
yeah. All right.
absolutely. I think there's so much to be mined there, and it's always an interesting topic to chat about. We do have some audience questions, though, that I did want to make sure we had time to get to. We actually had a healthy amount because, we haven't pulled from this well for a few episodes. So
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Yeah.
'Cause-
Nice.
yeah, no, we got some good questions. I really appreciate all the folks who send them to us. So the first one is from Mega ED Productions, and they asked or said, let's say you TF'd into your favorite animal. Would you like to be able for people to only hear animal noises from you or your actual voice? And additionally, would you want to be able to understand fellow animals or not? So, Kate, I'll let you answer first.
Oh, favorite animal. I'm not really sure I'm very like day-to-day sort of thing, but I'd probably go with like actual voice because again, the storyteller. Like everyone gather around the story cow for a tale today.
Yeah.
And then like be able to understand. I would assume most animals probably couldn't. I guess like instinctually understand them. Yeah, I guess that would probably help if I'm gonna live with them.
Yeah. Oh, that makes sense. How about you?
I'd pick my own voice. It'd be nice to be able to be around as something, speak, and then somebody having no idea where the fuck the voice is coming from.
Yeah.
Me and nothing, and no one else is around. What's going on? It'd also be good. Yeah, it would just be really. It'd also be practical so that people would know who I am.
Yeah.
So I don't lose that. And I don't want to be able to understand other animals
Oh, interesting. Why?
because you can hear them already. Imagine hearing chatter everywhere all the time.
Oh, that's a good point, actually.
Imagine me living here at 3 a.m. with the robins, chirping off
Yeah.
because they can't go to sleep because they don't know what time of day it really is. I do not want to hear that. And, also other animals, insects too. You will hear everything all the time.
Ooh.
Blocking that out, depending on where you are,
Yeah.
you might not want to go outside some days.
That's a good point, actually.
Mm, that-
Like,
I guess I assumed that you'd just be like my own species be the only one, not every single animal. Like that.
yeah, I
would
guess
be a
that's a
little-
fair point.
Well, it said fellow animals.
It did.
but
The question did.
Oh, okay.
So that's fair.
Okay,
Well,
okay, that's fair.
I
That's
interpret it as like, well, everything else is an animal. If I can understand everything, holy shit.
But okay, let's permutate that a bit. If it was just the one species you turned into, would you want that, or would that still be a no?
Sure, I'd go for that. I can do that, but otherwise,
no.
well,
Yeah,
actually,
If it was all of them, that would be annoying.
yeah. If it's just the species, why not? Because then I can navigate as myself and like
Their culture.
I can
Yeah, I don't need to
I
hear
can
the
put
ants.
myself into places that would look natural. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't need to hear the spiders in my walls talking.
Yeah, exactly. I think see, I'm torn. I think for the sake of like an interesting story, the more interesting answer is like only animal noises and you can understand your fellow animals. But I think personally I would also want my actual voice because again, I want to be able to like communicate, for example, with people who I care about to be like, hey, I TF'd. In terms of understanding the fellow animals or not, though, I think I would go with no in general, even within the same species. Not because I wouldn't be interested to hear what they have to say, but because I think it would almost like further highlight how like unique and alien a space you occupy, being like the one animal who can talk and then also cannot understand like their own kind to some degree. I think that's a really interesting space to embody, and I feel like that kind of like elevates the feeling of like alienation in the new body, and I think that's kind of cool. So that would be my answer. So
That makes sense to me. And
Interesting.
yeah, and if you want to be able to explore that way. Although it does make me realize that at some point, if you can only hear those of your own species,
mm,
you know, two species, you're like, why can't I understand another one? That kind of sucks. You're always left wanting more.
yeah, I guess that's true.
Oh, those other dogs have a weird accent. I can't understand them.
Yeah. The next question we have comes from Max Velocity. We do stand Max Velocity, and they ask, "What's a trend in TF that you feel was prevalent a decade or two ago but isn't anymore?" I don't know actually if anyone wants to go first on this one. If you have any thoughts.
I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, me too, actually.
The only thing
Um,
like it kind of comes to mind, like I feel like it's because there's the community's gotten bigger. There's a lot more, just like I said, like leaning into it. TF. There's a lot more.
oh,
Yeah, this is awesome.
I got
I
one.
like stories and art, in which I definitely enjoy more.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know what the well, okay, if we're keeping it just to this,
Yeah.
the thing I don't see anymore is that nobody gets to learn a lesson. Nobody gets to nobody gets to come back from the experience and be like, I know better. I'm actually going to be a better person.
That's a
This
good
lesson
point.
has been enlightening.
Yeah.
It has been harrowing. It has been terrifying. It has been emotional. It has been all those things. I'm back to the life that I came to. The punishment worked on me and actually also reformed me. That's just like not fucking there.
That's a really good point. I
Yeah,
hadn't thought about that, but you're right. Because like, well, also like, I think about like all the memes about like, oh, you know, like you hear there's like a piece of media with like TF in it, for example, and the audience is cheering. They're like, oh yeah, the person TFs, and then like the second image is like, oh, but they change back in the end, and everyone's like seated and not saying anything. And I feel like you're right. It's so much less prevalent these days because people in particular are like, no, I want them to like stay TF'd and enjoy the TF. And it's like, okay, but there should be space as well for stories where, like you said, the person actually like learns the lesson. Like to use an example, I think of like Voyage of the Dawn Treader, which is a C.S. Lewis novel that they also made into a movie. There's a guy in there who's kind of a dick and he turns into a dragon, which to be clear, I don't actually understand how this like teaches the lesson because I'd be like, yeah, I'm a dragon, cool. But anyways, whatever. He turns into a dragon and that helps him like learn a lesson, and then he turns back at the end. And I think that's like the last time I can think of, at least in recent memory, where I saw like that prevalent in like media.
Yeah.
I can tell you another story where that's the case, and they explain why being a dragon sucks. Actually,
Where
it's in an anthology of short stories for the Dragonlance universe called Dragons of Krynn, and I don't remember if it was like a dwarf or something like that. It wasn't a human, but it was just like a one of those like smaller humanoid type of people.
Yeah.
And gets turned into a massive dragon, and completely aware of everything going on. Destroys the space they're in. This is because they like were fucking around in some like wizard's library or something.
Of course, as one does.
Yeah, and well, I would too, even.
Yeah,
just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
So yeah, they turn into a dragon, and they're like, oh my god, I can't be here. The the Kingdom's Guard is trying to kill me all the time. I can't go home. All the people that I care about, my friends won't recognize me. I have to eat. What do I possibly eat? Do I eat that stuff? Oh my God, I don't want to eat that stuff. Oh my God, that's terrifying. Like, it makes me nauseous thinking about it, but I can't starve, and all this other stuff. And so that was very much like, there wasn't like a great like character arc, but it's kind of like you screwed around and now you had an adventure and you learn not to screw around with stuff that you don't understand. But got to come out for it worse for wear, and the wizard's kind of like, fucking do that shit again. That's
so
Yeah,
it's the fuck around and find out lesson.
Yeah, exactly.
The more you fuck around, the more you find out.
And that's just not there. It's and again, if at least like the clientele is any indicator, it's just like I guess it's popular to just want people to get fucked up, and I'm like, what happens to when people would actually learn a lesson? That also doesn't suck either. I like people coming out of things better, but what the fuck? I don't know.
No, yeah, you're. I know I'm working on a novel right now that's actually much more positive and comes away with the lessons, so it does feel nice. So, like, yeah, it's definitely far more into that dirty sort of range now, where it's like you said, like that. I can think of like the Golden Ass. I think is like a Roman from Roman times about a guy who was turned into a donkey. He wanted to turn into a bird, and then he had to live. So yeah, those stories are. But now, it's more like grim fairy tale now, where it's like, oh, you fucked up and you die.
Yeah. Oh, that's
just good.
I think, God, I was sitting here, I was thinking, I could not think of an additional trend. I feel like that one just kind of took the cake for me, though. So I will unfortunately bow out on providing an answer because I cannot think of one. And then I guess we have a final question from Figerfire, and Figerfire asks, what is your preferred consequence of taking a TF dose that's past its expiration date?
What?
So, like, you take a TF potion, but it's labeled like, don't take it after this date, and then you still, like, consume it. So, like, what's your consequence?
I assume if it's like most medicines where if they expire, it's like because like the ingredients or some of them went inert. So it's like this potion is supposed to turn you into a big, bulky, muscular guy because it's like a modified like bull potion or something. But oh no, the thing that keeps you from turning into a bull no longer works. So I guess you're going to turn into a bull now.
Oh, that's good. I like that.
It's sort of unexpected, like, oh, whoops.
Yeah. No, I dig that. What do you think?
I just think of weaker stuff or a shorter duration.
Okay.
It doesn't really work all that well. So maybe that would be interesting. I don't know. Like, I don't have really a preference about that idea when I think about it. It could be interesting to know that you will only change part way, and it could be kind of unpleasant, and just being stuck half formed, because if people are like, oh, I'm half TF'd, it's just an anthro version. No. What if it was just like, yes, it's like, imagine like the midpoint of like any single piece, and that's you,
and that's what you are.
That's you for like I don't know how much time.
I dig that.
And so I don't know about preferred, but that was the most interesting one I could think of. That, or again, shorter duration, where you're like, oh yeah, you're gonna do this, but it's only gonna last you for like a couple hours instead of the whole day. Shit like that.
That would be fun if you did like you thought was going to last for 5 hours, but it only lasted for 2, and you were somewhere you shouldn't be. Sort of.
Oh no, I'm not.
You change.
I'm not.
Yeah, no. Oh yeah, I'm not downing it. I'm just saying that's a good way to like run with it.
No, that's fine. I was thinking more drastic. Like this is a day potion, but you get 2 hours. So if you got 2 hours, you got 30 minutes, something like that.
Yeah, and it's like unknown too, where it's like, like you were saying, Kate. It's like, oh, you might end up somewhere while you're TF that you're not expecting, and then you
No, I was gonna be I was gonna be a whale for 2 hours. Or I was gonna be a bird. That'd be a kind of a problem.
That would be a problem, especially if you're flying somewhere. I think I have two, I will say. The first one would be, it's kind of a permutation of what you said, but I would think more direct of like, you get like certain parts fully TF'd and other parts that are not TF'd at all. So you could get almost like a smorgasbord of like your head fully TF'd and your arms fully TF'd, and you had like the tail, but your torso and legs are fully human. And it's like, what the fuck do you do with that? I think that's kind of cool.
You're better. You're in the infirmary.
Yeah, kind of. Which is like, yeah, maybe if you fucked around with something that expired, that's what happens. That would be one. The other one, because I'll show my whole ass. I think of like, a potion's like gone past its expiration date, so it's gonna have like something completely unexpected. So like maybe you get like upside down TF'd or something instead of like normal, because it's like, oh, the ingredients are like all fucked up now, so it's gonna like do you backwards instead of forwards. I think that's kind of fun.
Okay, yeah.
That works.
It's a really open-ended question. You just kind of pontificated about this for a while.
Yeah, well, that's why I like the question, because it's like you could go any number of directions with it, right?
Well, I didn't think of it, so
Yeah.
hey.
Yeah, shout out to Figer Fire for the banger question. But yeah, that was all the questions I think we had. I don't know if you had any questions for us, Kate.
I didn't have anything on the top of my head prepared, but no, yeah, it was fun talking, guys, and it was like your insights on things. I don't usually get a chance to really talk about TFs too much as I probably would like.
Yeah. No, I feel that. And like, I think one of the most fun things of doing this podcast is getting to have those conversations, and getting to have those conversations with folks who maybe don't have those outlets to talk aloud about it. So I'm glad that you found that valuable. And, as always, we want to make sure that you also get a chance to plug yourself. So if people are looking for you online, where can they find you?
Sure. Like I'm on Patreon at patreon.com/Kate Marquet. I'm on like Fur Affinity, DocsLab, DeviantArt. Just search Kate Marquet and I'll pop up because I'm pretty much the only one. And on DocsLab, I'm a type error. I'm Kate Marquet.
Oh, there you go.
Don't create accounts while you're drunk. That's all I'm gonna say. Get typos.
No, that does make sense. I guess you never went back to correct it, eh?
It was one of those like, I just never got around to it, and it's not like there's anyone else that's doing it or using my name, so no one's gonna get confused.
No, that's fair. That's fair. Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Kate, and thank you so much, everyone, for listening. Again, we have a jam-packed season 4 prepared for you all, so I'm really excited to start rolling these episodes out, and I hope that you will enjoy listening to them as much as we are going to enjoy recording them. But in the meantime, I hope that you all have a wonderful week. I hope that you all stay hydrated, because it is sure damn hot out there for a lot of us in the Northern Hemisphere, and that you get good rest and keep an open mind and stay TFy, and we'll see you all here back again next week.
And send us questions at TFTuesdayPod with #TFTuesdayPod. And if you want to get more questions in.
Yeah, leave those comments in the YouTube videos too. We read them all, even if I don't respond to them.
Yeah, talk to us. We'll definitely see it.
Yeah, talk to us, and maybe we'll play.
Please do.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks everyone, and talk soon.
Yeah, see everybody.
Well, thank you.